In January 2011, while Brazilian football was still reorganizing itself after yet another generation labeled as the next to dominate the world, a name began echoing through the stands of the São Paulo Youth Cup. Negueba. Fast, explosive, fearless, decisive. A skinny but electric forward who seemed to embody everything Brazilian football has always marketed as its greatest treasure. Improvisation, courage, pure talent. The 2011 Copinha was not just another youth tournament won by Flamengo. It became symbolic. Flamengo secured a rare back-to-back title in the competition, and Negueba became the face of that campaign, not just because of goals, but because of impact. When he touched the ball, something happened. The tempo shifted, defenders retreated, the crowd reacted. In a tournament traditionally filled with promises, Negueba looked different. That explosive beginning placed Negueba somewhere dangerous. Immediate expectation. The context of the time amplified everything. Brazilian football was witnessing the emergence of a historic generation. Neymar was already becoming a technical and media phenomenon at Santos. Lucas Moura was rising at São Paulo. Philippe Coutinho had broken through at Vasco and was already heading to Europe. Within that landscape, Negueba appeared as the next name ready for the leap. For many analysts at the time, he was not behind in raw talent. Inside Flamengo, he was treated as an asset. A winger with extreme speed, aggressive short dribbling, sharp finishing ability, visible personality. His youth career suggested someone always physically and technically ahead of his peers. More than that, he did not shrink in big games. He grew. The 2011 Copinha cemented that image. Negueba wasn't just a highlight player in a well-organized team. He was the one who unlocked matches when they stalled. Naturally, the jump to professional football came quickly. Perhaps too quickly. Still in 2011, Negueba was integrated into Flamengo's senior squad. The fans welcomed him with enormous expectation, fueled by recent memories of a youth triumph and the club's historical hunger for homegrown, attacking stars. The shirt was heavy, but at first, Negueba didn't seem intimidated. He entered matches well, created individual plays, brought unpredictability to a squad that often lacked it. It's important to remember Brazilian football at that time. The game was more open, less tactically rigid, more forgiving to improvisation. In theory, it was the ideal environment for a player like Negueba. Individual talent could still decide matches. Physical demands, while present, were not yet as extreme as they would become just a few years later. Everything appeared aligned. The club needed flair. The league allowed space. The player had confidence. It felt like a natural rise. But football rarely warns before it demands. As the number of games increased, interruptions began to appear. Minor muscular discomforts, short absences, quick returns. The body started sending signals. For a player whose main weapon was explosiveness, any physical limitation was already a major obstacle. Every interruption broke rhythm, confidence, continuity. And in professional football, continuity is everything. While Neymar and Lucas Moura managed to maintain sequences, evolve physically, and grow into central roles, Negueba began entering a dangerous cycle. Strong performance in one match, discomfort in the next. Weeks out, return without the same impact. Professional football does not forgive irregularity. Internal competition increased. Patience decreased. And this is where the trajectory began to change shape. Negueba was no longer just the promising youth star. He was facing the hardest challenge of his career, aligning talent, body, and context at the same time. And that equation is rarely simple. If there is a turning point in Negueba's career, it begins here. The talent was still there, the desire too, but the body started demanding a price. At first, the injuries seemed like normal early career setbacks. Muscle issues, short recoveries, minor concerns, nothing dramatic. But repetition changes everything. What once looked incidental started becoming a pattern. And for a player built on acceleration, sudden changes of direction, and short-distance explosion, even small physical limitations were devastating. Then came the more serious problems, especially in the knee. For most footballers, knee injuries are dangerous. For explosive attackers, they are transformative. Negueba's style depended on sharp cuts, instant acceleration, unpredictable body feints. Every movement required trust in the joint. And when that trust disappears, the game changes. Each return to the pitch required a new adaptation process. Rebuilding rhythm, rebuilding strength, rebuilding confidence. But often, he came back before the ideal moment. Partly because he wanted to help the team. Partly because he feared losing space. And in professional football, that fear is justified. There is an unwritten rule in football. If you cannot maintain sequence, you lose ground. Negueba fell directly into that cycle. He would play one game, feel discomfort in the next, disappear for weeks, return without match rhythm. That pattern blocks evolution. Without sequence, there is no physical growth. Without physical growth, there is no full confidence. Without confidence, talent becomes restricted. The player who once attacked defenders without hesitation started thinking twice. And in high-level football, hesitation is fatal. At the same time, Flamengo was going through instability. Frequent managerial changes, short-term sporting projects, constant shifts in playing style. For a developing player, this is decisive. Every new coach meant proving himself again, adapting to new tactical demands, convincing someone new of his value, even without having had real continuity. One manager might want a classic winger, another might demand defensive discipline, another might prefer physical strength over flair. Negueba was still trying to stabilize his body, while the club around him was unstable. That combination rarely produces success. Meanwhile, Brazilian football itself was transforming, silently but decisively. The game was becoming more physical, more intense, more tactically organized. Space was shrinking, recovery speed increased, pressing systems became more coordinated. Players who relied purely on individual brilliance were now required to add structure and defensive responsibility. Preparation became scientific. Explosiveness had to be supported by endurance. Creativity had to coexist with discipline. Those who adapted thrived. Those who couldn't keep up fell behind, regardless of potential. And then comes one of football's most brutal labels: the eternal promise. The player who always seems about to explode, but never quite sustains it. The phrase repeats itself. When he's fully fit, he'll deliver. But football does not wait. Every season brings new talents, new investments, new signings. Negueba's space gradually shrank, not because he lacked ability, but because he lacked continuity. And in elite football, continuity is currency. Being labeled a jewel early creates a silent debt to the past. Every mistake becomes magnified. Every average performance reinforces doubt. The player stops being evaluated for who he is now. He is constantly compared to what he was supposed to become. Negueba entered that psychological cycle, not because of laziness, not because of lack of effort, but because football rarely explains context in headlines. Repeated injuries do not only affect muscles, they affect instinct. The player begins to hesitate in sprints, avoid heavier contact, lose the natural rhythm of movements that were once automatic. For someone whose identity was boldness, that changes everything. The game still demands maximum intensity, but the body responds with caution, and the mind follows. With reduced space at Flamengo, the loans began. The idea was simple: give him minutes, restore rhythm, rebuild confidence. In practice, loans rarely come with structure. He joined clubs dealing with instability, managerial turnover, immediate pressure for results. There was no time, no patience, no long-term vision. And for a player trying to rebuild from physical setbacks, that environment is brutal. Sometimes flashes appeared. A dribble that reminded everyone of 2011. A decisive goal. A performance above average. And once again, the discussion returned. Now he's back. But soon after, another injury, a drop in form, another coaching change, and everything restarted from zero. While his generation peers were consolidating careers abroad, Negueba was fighting to stabilize his own path. Not fighting for stardom, fighting for sequence. And that distinction defines the next phase of his career. There comes a moment in the career of many early sensations, when the noise fades. No more daily headlines, no more comparisons with generational stars, no more debates about the future of Brazilian football. Silence. And silence in football can mean many things. For Negueba, it meant transition. The market no longer saw him as a future superstar. He was no longer an investment asset, no longer resale potential. He became something different, a professional footballer trying to sustain a career. That transition is not simple. When you explode too early, people freeze your image in time. They remember the copinha, they remember the speed, they remember the promise, but they rarely adjust their expectations to reality. Negueba continued playing professionally. Different clubs, different cities, different environments, inside Brazil and outside it. Always searching for something he never managed to sustain for long. Regularity. In certain periods, he found decent sequences. He showed maturity, better game reading, more collective contribution, less impulsiveness. But the game had evolved. Football was now faster, more compact, more physical. The market no longer treated him as potential. He was now evaluated purely on output, match after match, without the cushion of hype, without the protection of expectation. This is where many former prodigies disappear. Not because they stopped loving football, but because they struggled to redefine themselves. Negueba didn't disappear. He adapted. The injuries did not vanish completely, but they became more controlled. He understood his own physical limits better. Load management, specific training, longer recovery windows. That self-awareness is part of professional maturity. However, it came at a cost. He could no longer rely solely on explosiveness. He had to compensate with positioning, timing, decision-making. The version of Negueba at this stage was not the same electric teenager. He was more cautious, more calculated, less spectacular, but still professional. It's important to be clear about something. Negueba's career did not decline because of indiscipline, lack of professionalism, irresponsible off-field behavior. On the contrary, reports from coaches and teammates consistently pointed to commitment, correct posture, daily dedication. The issue was structural. His playing style demanded extreme physical sharpness, and his body could not sustain that demand consistently over time. That is not scandal. That is biology. And timing. Another decisive element was environment. Brazilian football rarely allows space for reinvention. The pressure for immediate results consumes individual development. You either deliver now, or you lose space. Negueba rarely found a stable project that allowed him to reposition himself tactically, gradually adjust his role, rebuild identity without urgency. Every season felt like a test. Every club felt temporary. And when a player lives in permanent evaluation mode, long-term growth becomes almost impossible. There is a unique burden for players labeled too early. They are not compared to others. They are compared to their own myth, to that idealized version that existed for a brief moment. Negueba carried that comparison for years. Every restart was accompanied by the ghost of 2011. Every decent performance was followed by, remember how good he was back then? That constant backward gaze affects confidence, creative freedom, joy in playing, and football without joy becomes mechanical. For a player whose essence was improvisation, that shift is enormous. With time, Negueba's story demands a more honest reading. He did not fail. He did not vanish. He did not quit football. He built a professional career. He lived from the sport. He competed at high levels in different moments. He was decisive in one of the most important youth tournaments in the world. Perhaps the mistake was never the trajectory. Perhaps it was the expectation. Negueba was not an error of Brazilian football. He was a product of it. A system that accelerates youth too quickly, places heavy labels before formation is complete, demands immediate return, offers little time for reconstruction. His case is not an exception. It is a pattern. And this is where his story becomes larger than his name. Because Negueba represents something broader. The fragile line between potential and permanence. With distance, Negueba's story demands something rare in football. Honesty. Not nostalgia. Not exaggeration. Not judgment. Honesty. Because when we remove the noise, the comparisons, the projections, and the labels, what remains is this. Negueba was extremely talented. He exploded at the right tournament, at the wrong time. He carried expectation before he built structure. And when the body interrupted the rhythm, the system did not slow down to protect him. It simply moved on. Football culture often treats talent as destiny. If you are gifted enough, you will make it. If you don't make it, you must have lacked something. Effort, focus, mental strength. But that narrative ignores something fundamental. Talent is only the starting point. For talent to become permanence, it needs a body that sustains it, a context that protects it, a project that believes in gradual growth. Time. Negueba had the first. He struggled with the second, and rarely experienced the third. Brazilian football, historically, thrives on early explosion. Clubs need financial return. Fans crave idols. Media demands new stars. And when a teenager shines in a national youth tournament, the acceleration begins. Contracts improve. Expectations rise. Opportunities come fast. But development does not always follow the same speed. Negueba became a symbol before he became stable. And when instability appeared, physical and contextual, the same system that celebrated him no longer knew how to wait. Is tempting to frame his career with that question. What could have been? But that question is unfair, because it compares reality to imagination. Instead, maybe the better question is, what actually was? He played professionally for years. He adapted. He survived a competitive market. He experienced different football cultures. Many players who shined in youth tournaments never reach that stage. Negueba did, not as a global superstar, but as a professional. And there is dignity in that. Behind every Wonder Kid headline, there is a human being, someone learning to deal with pressure, with physical pain, with expectation, with comparison. We rarely see that part. We see the dribbles, the goals, the viral clips. We don't see the rehabilitation sessions, the doubt after repeated injuries, the internal frustration of not being able to move the way you once did. Negueba's career reminds us that decline is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is gradual, subtle, quiet. He will not be remembered as one of Brazil's greatest, but he will be remembered by those who watched that 2011 tournament, by those who believed, by those who saw the explosion and imagined the future. And in that sense, Negueba became a symbol, not a failure, but of how fragile projection can be. His story teaches that early brilliance does not guarantee permanence. Physical sustainability is as important as technical quality. Environment shapes careers as much as talent does. Expectation can elevate and suffocate. Football is built on dreams, but is also built on limits. Recognizing limits does not diminish the sport. It humanizes it. Maybe the lesson of Negueba is not about what went wrong. Maybe it is about how football evaluates success. If success is only becoming Neymar, then thousands have failed. But if success includes building a long professional journey, despite setbacks, despite injuries, despite fading spotlight, then Negueba did not fail. He endured. He adapted. He kept going. And in a sport that rarely forgives interruption, that is something. Negueba's story is not tragic, is realistic, is the story of talent meeting timing, of potential meeting physical limitation, of expectation meeting structure. And structure in football often wins. If you reach this point, you understand that football is more than trophies and headlines. Is trajectory, context, decision, and consequence. If this kind of analysis speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. Leave your comment. In Negueba's career, what weighed more, the physical setbacks, the context around him, where the expectation placed too early. Here, football is treated with memory, depth, and respect. And the story continues in the next video.